Alright, in this video, I want to take a look at a few developments that I haven't covered yet on this channel involving several countries. The first of which is going to be Germany. Now, a lot of polls have come out in Germany following the previous federal election, showing what the polls are for the next Bundestag. And although these are very irrelevant because the next elections won't be held for another 4 years, they do show how the political mood has shifted in Germany since the election. And what's very interesting is we've had two polls that come out that have shown either the AfD in first place or tied for first place. We had a poll from INSA that came out a few days ago, putting them at 24.5% of the vote, tied with the CDU CSU. And then recently we had a poll from Ipsos that showed them at 25%, 1 point ahead of the CDU CSU. Now, what's very interesting is that this is the first poll ever that has showed the AfD as the largest political party in Germany, not just ahead of the CDU, but ahead of the combined union. And of course, this is not the entire polling aggregate. This is not every polling agency. This is only a few. This is only one or two polls. However, we are seeing signs that the AfD might be overtaking the CDU-CSU on the federal level. Now, will they be able to hold this for 4 years until the next federal election, or in a few years if there's snap elections? Of course, that is something entirely different question. It's very hard for political parties to maintain momentum for years at a time, and it's often the case that after a federal election, the mood will change for one way or another. In 2018, after the 2017 federal elections, the AfD surged to 18, 19%. However, they were not able to hold that support up until the 2021 election. And so I doubt that these aren't really going to be meaningful polls based on what's going to happen in the next election, because that is so far out. But they are very interesting to show the way the political mood is in Germany, and this will have an effect on state elections, because even if there's not a federal election, there will be elections all throughout Germany, local state elections. And if the AfD is now the #1 party in Germany in some polls, that shows they're going to have success pretty much everywhere. And this is, of course, a very big situation, because Friedrich Merz and his CDU-CSU won the election, and of course they are now basically everything is the coalition is basically formed. It's all but official now between the CDU, CSU, and the SPD, the new Grand Coalition. And usually when a new government is sworn in, they see a kind of boost in popularity. There's a honeymoon phase for the new incumbent. However, for Friedrich Merz and the CDU SPD government, that is not really the case. We've seen a drop in support for the CDU, and there's a few reasons for this. Friedrich Merz himself and the SPD and the CDU were not popular really before the election. They were able to win the election, able to gain votes. However, Friedrich Merz as an individual was not more popular than his party. He struggled in the approval ratings, and the only reason he was able to beat Olaf Scholz is because Scholz and some of the other candidates were also very low in popularity. And then again, we also had the instance where the debt brake was reformed. The CDU ushered in the old Bundestag that had been, ousted, basically unelected in their lame duck period, in order to reform the constitution to allow for, adjustments to the budget. And this was seen by a lot of voters as, it was of course legal, but it was a very, very special thing to do, something that has never been done before, bringing in the old Bundestag 1 week before the new one was sworn in to change the constitution. And so a lot of voters, a lot of people probably were angry at the CDU, CSU, and some of the other parties because of this, and we also see kind of a lack of enthusiasm. And because of that, in some polls, we see the AfD now overtaking the CDU. But like I said, there's no major elections right now anytime soon, so these polls aren't going to mean too much, and we could see the AfD subside. Once we actually get the government, we could see a lot of things change. So not too important, but it is very significant, because this Ipsos poll does mark the very first time that the AfD is tracked as the largest party in Germany, at least in a poll. Not by much, only by 1 point, but it is very significant for that reason. Now, the other story I want to talk about, two other stories, but the first one outside of Germany is to talk about the French presidential elections. Now, the French presidential elections are far off. We were talking about the Polish and Romanian presidential elections, which are going to happen in May. The French presidential election will not happen until the spring of 2027, so we have 2 years until that. But we had a recent decision by the French courts to basically prevent Marine Le Pen from running for the presidency, and this is very significant because Marine Le Pen, according to the polls, was the #1 candidate. She was polling, first place in the first round, and was neck and neck with various candidates in the second round. Now, basically, the gist of this case is that Marine Le Pen and other members of the National Rally, then the National Front, used money and funds allocated to them at the EU level on the national level. And what this means is they were paid money for speechwriters, secretaries, staffers in Brussels to work in Brussels and Strasbourg for their parliamentary work at the EU level. But they then took some of the money, some of the staffers and speechwriters, and used it to help build up their party on the national level. This is something that has happened with a lot of political parties, and the reason they did this is, of course, sometimes that the party, there's different election systems, and so the National Rally struggled to win seats in the French Parliament in Paris, but were able to win seats at the European Parliament, and so they tried to divert some of their funds from Brussels to Paris, from the party group in the European Parliament to the the political party itself. And this is, of course, technically illegal. This is technically embezzlement, even though it's going from it's still the party on one form or another, those funds are allocated for the, basically are public funds allocated to members of the government or elected officials at one level. And it's a way that the public funds are there to help a party, because they see, that the party is elected on behalf of the people, there to serve the people. And it's very hard for politicians. They have speech, they need speech writers, they need staffers, everything to schedule the day-to-day work, to help them write the speeches, help them get their schedule. And so they have these funds here for staffers in where they were elected, and sometimes they'll move the money out to help areas where the party has struggled, where the party doesn't have as much money. And this is something a lot of parties have done in the past, and a lot of parties have gotten in trouble with. Some other politicians from one of the liberal parties in France, allied with Macron, have gotten in trouble for this as well. But of course, the big scandal was involving the French National Rally, and this is a very old case. This is a case that's been going on for almost a decade. And this is, of course, the fact that it's being done before the presidential election. There's a conviction, does add a politicization to it. And of course, many people on the left, the liberal side, are defending it, saying that this is what Marine Le Pen did was illegal, and so it's right to fine her and to bar her from running. But there's some people from the National Rally and also some people from the liberals and the left who are criticizing this, saying that even though what she did was illegal, to bar her from the presidency, which is what has been done, is very very controversial, because she was the front runner and they did this before the election. Now, of course, Marine Le Pen and the National Rally will definitely try to appeal this and challenge this. There's still a few years from the election, but it is very likely that Marine Le Pen will not be able to run in the presidential election. And this changes a lot because, as I said, Marine Le Pen was the front runner. She was in first place for the first round, polling around 36, 38% of the vote. Now, a lot of things can happen. The National Rally will still likely be able to put forward a front runner for this race. Jordan Bardella, the leader of the party in the European Parliament, is likely, is one likely person. There's also other members of the Marine Le Pen family. She has a niece, a few sisters that bear her last name, and if they're worried about name recognition on the ballot, they could run one of her, someone from her family. However, if they want someone that's, been groomed and built up in the party, Jordan Bardella has been basically seen as her successor by many, who is now the actual party leader and leader in the European Parliament. Now, the plan, I believe, was for Marine Le Pen to become president and Jordan Bardella to become prime minister. But if Marine Le Pen is not able to appeal this and not able to run in 2027, I think it is very likely that Jordan Bardella or someone from her family will take the position. And of course, we see there is somewhat of a difference. Now, Jordan Bardella does poll as the number one candidate when he runs, however, not by the same margin Marine Le Pen does. Marine Le Pen is around 36, 38. Bardella is a few points below her, just because he's not as well known as Marine Le Pen. But of course, this does change things, because this changes, one of the major candidates in the presidential election for France, which is a huge country in the EU. And so this will be a very big deal. But of course, we are still 2 years out from the election itself, and we will have a lot, see a lot of changes in the polls. It is possible that this could, be overturned. It's possible that Jordan Bardella could not be the candidate for the National Rally. Even the candidates for the left or for Macron's party are not decided, because Emmanuel Macron himself is term limited. So all the candidates are not really fine-tuned, and we're not really sure of who's going to be running yet. But this does kind of throw a wrench into the whole system and change a lot of what we were expected to have in the elections in 2027. Of course, if we get more updates on this, I will do it. I'll of course cover it on this channel. But this has been, of course, a big story out of France that kind of changes the political situation in the country. The last story I want to look at, or not really story, but election, is going to be the Vienna state elections in Austria. Vienna, similar to Berlin, Hamburg, is a city kind of that operates as a state. It is one of the 9 federal states of Austria, and it will be holding its election. Now, Vienna is a stronghold for the Social Democrats, and they will likely retain power in this state. Even if they lose, a majority, don't win a majority, they can form a coalition with the People's Party, the Greens, the Neos, and so it's very likely that the Social Democrats will be able to hold on to the state. It's not really a competitive election, but of course, the big thing to look at is, will the Freedom Party be able to make major gains? And according to some polls, they will. In the 2020 state election, they suffered heavy losses. In 2015 and 2010, they were able to win huge gains off of their leader Hans-Christian Strache, who was actually from Vienna, and they got to believe up to around 30%. And then they suffered it after the scandal, the Ibiza scandal. They lost heavy support in the 2020 state election, and so we see they have recovered a lot of their support, going from around 7% to 20, even 24% in the latest polls. And so this election won't really matter too much, because the Social Democrats, the SPÖ, will pretty much be guaranteed to win and put forward the next, governor, Landeshauptmann, or mayor. But we will have to look at the results for the Freedom Party and some of the other parties, because it will be kind of a check to see what the mood is in Austrian politics. And of course, Vienna, even though it's a city state, it is a city of around 1 million people. It has a lot more weight than some of the cities. And, Hamburg is 1 million people out of 80 million in Germany, but Vienna does have a higher population. And so this election will be significant to see what the mood is in Austria. So that's going to be it for this video. Of course, I will do some more updates on the elections in Romania and Poland soon. And if we get any more updates from France or Germany, I will do that as well. But that's going to be it. And I hope you guys liked the video. If you do, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching.